Hey everyone, it's September 27th, 2020. My name's Bobby Frankenberger, and I'm here with the rest of the SCN crew, and we're going to talk about some of the tabletop gaming news for this week. We'll be talking about HeroQuest news update, the Fallout war game that's getting an expansion, and some old D&D settings are getting some new love. So, let's get to it! So Modifius has a new expansion out for their Fallout war game. If you're not aware, Modifius, that games company that adapts all your favorite television shows, movies, and video games into tabletop games, has a war game called Fallout Wasteland Warfare. It originally released 2 years ago in August of 2018, and it's a war game where you build a crew of iconic characters from the Fallout series and combat each other in player versus player war game style. The game has a narrative campaign arc and a solo versus AI mode. But anyway, the news is that Modifius announced that coming in spring of 2021, they're going to be releasing a Mojave region expansion, which will bring the fan favorite Fallout New Vegas setting to the game. It's going to add more iconic characters like Legate Lanius, Chief Hansen, and factions like the Caesar's Legion and the New California Republic are going to be pitted against each other in this expansion. You'll need to have the base Fallout Wasteland Warfare game to play. But Cliff, I know that you, sir, are a fan of Fallout New Vegas. Who do you want to see added to this game as a character, and why was it the Kings? Or why is it the Kings as a playable faction that you want to see? I'm sure that's part of your answer.
I mean, that's it right there. I mean, there really is no other answer than if the King's not represented, it can't be a New Vegas expansion properly because I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of other stuff you could pull from it, but that's one of those things that stand out at me is just one of those funny moments playing the game, and that was a group that I wanted to hang out with. Later on, playing Fallout 4, definitely big with the Atom Cats. Walking around with my custom Atom Cats power armor, or when I get out of it, rocking my Atom Cats leather jacket.
Yeah.
So I just kind of dig the greasers gangs in Fallout. But you know what? If that doesn't happen, no big deal. I'll just get my super awesome slick ganger fix out of Gangs of the Undercity.
Yeah. You know, nice. I would not have been interested. Nice I would not have been interested in this Fallout game. I wasn't when it came out, but I've recently decided I'm going to give these types of games a try because of Opti's upcoming game.
Nice.
So I might have to try this one out too. Excited about it.
Have you all played the Fallout board game? I thought this was a board game. I didn't realize there was a war game as well.
No, I have not.
Today. I have heard of the board game too, but yeah, the war game, that's pretty much news to me. Mm-hmm. You know, the funny thing is about New Vegas, when you actually play it and really get to know it, you don't really want to back Caesar's Legion or the New California Republic because the NCR, they're both not doing good things for the area.
Right.
I feel like I really made a mistake by playing Fallout 1, 2, half of 3, and then half of 4, and totally skipping New Vegas.
Yeah,
Everybody says New Vegas is the best one, right?
Yeah,
it is one of the best. Definitely, it's easily up there with Fallout 3 and 4. Probably the best of those three. Though I do love the whole settlement building element of Fallout 4 so much that it propels it further to my liking than New Vegas was.
Yeah.
I think Fallout is just like a smidge too complicated for me. Like to be having a full-time job and children. And to also I just can't devote everything I need to devote.
Yeah,
to
absolutely. I've stopped and started Fallout 4 so many times, and I haven't finished it yet. But check out that game if you want to check it out, and let us know what you think about it. Some D&D news. We can't go a week without D&D news, right? That seems to be the case most of the time. D&D...
Their freaking business model.
D&D Celebration was this past weekend. Sunday, September 20th, during the Inside the D&D Studio panel, they announced that there would be a greater emphasis on settings in the years to come. They stated that this is going to include giving some much-desired attention to 3 classic settings. Specifics weren't given about which settings those were, but our good friend Daryl Mott over at EN World made a point in his most recent weekly news roundup that a July 2015 survey done by Wizards of the Coast showed that the most popular settings not supported yet in 5e are Dark Sun, Planescape, Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and Spelljammer. So likely, there's a good chance we're going to see 3 of those from that list. Also mentioned during the panel was that there would be more upcoming products aimed at the mainstream player who doesn't have time to read tons of books in order to get into the game, which seems to line up with some of the things coming out in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, like the sidekick class that we've talked about before. So, good news coming, I suppose. I never played any of those old settings, so I can't say that I'm excited about them, but I know that some people are, so that's cool. Have you guys played any of those settings?
Yes. Oh yeah. The Dragonlance, like if they release a Dragonlance, that would be the first D&D thing I would really be super excited for 5e to like stream. I would like have to do some sort of campaign.
Describe Dragonlance in 1 sentence.
Nostalgia.
Okay, try again. Something that we can actually follow.
It is a classic high fantasy stuff, right? Like where like the I don't know, like the people that mostly love it, like really love a couple of the characters like Raistlin, if you've heard of that character. But there was just this sort of moment in the late 80s, I suppose, where Dragonlance was just sort of everything that you wanted. It had Bahamut, and it had Tiamat, and it had like the race of dragon people, and it had like high, Knights of the Rose and the Knights of the Sword. Like it was just this whole setting where like it kind of distilled all the sort of best D&D for me that I really enjoyed. And so I would really appreciate like going back to that. Like all the other settings sort of feel like D&D adjacent, right? Like they take the high fantasy and then they take it to a different direction, right? But the Dragonlance just said high fantasy, bam, we're sticking with it. Yeah. And it's just like a Lord of the Rings adjacent, right? It's just a different high fantasy setting that just pushed all the right buttons for me when I was a kid.
It's also the only D&D setting, I think, unless they've imported them into other ones that I haven't heard of, that has Kender. So that's definitely a plus book.
A plus for some people. I know they have a lot of hate, but Kender is their sort of halfling or Hobbit class, or
way cooler.
Yeah, but they have this penchant for like stealing things, like they're sort of kleptomaniacal, but they're kind-hearted. It's a fun take on the species. But yeah, Dragonlance is just super cool. I would really love it.
Blind Guardian songs set based off Dragonlance setting material.
Well,
I'd also be surprised if they didn't do Spelljammer because of the popularity of crud. Help me out. What's the one that just released from the D&D clone? Shoot!
I can't help you.
Space Finder? What was it?
Oh, Starfinder?
Starfinder! Thank you.
More like Star Wars, but with D&D feel. Spelljammer is super different and weird. Yeah. I think Greyhawk is one of these that they can afford to just not do because it's like Greyhawk is generic like D&D default, setting.
Right? Default D&D setting? Yeah. Or is that Eberron now? Eberron.
Yeah, it's basically Greyhawk is vanilla D&D. There's nothing that stands out to me about it that I can go like, oh, yay, I remember that time we adventured there or did this. Yeah. It's like, oh, those are all the generic gods that I have to translate over to the Forgotten Realms ones or the Dragonlance ones when I'm playing. So I think Greyhawk is not as important. Planescape could be interesting, but also is like just to throw everything in the
I don't even know
sort of
what
thing.
That is. I've never played.
I'm going to put my money on Dark Sun, Dragonlance, and Spelljammer.
I've never met anybody who was like, man, I just need Dark Sun.
Like the chat says Dark Sun or bust. So
there are people who are like as Dark Sun, as hopeful about Dark Sun as you are about Dragonlance. Hands down.
Okay.
Well,
I tried to get into a Dark Sun campaign and just fizzled. So
if you're go ahead and tell us in the comments which of those you're looking forward to, or if there's another one that wasn't mentioned that you're hoping that they're going to resurrect, and if you're a fan of Space Finder. Let us know that as well. All right, next on the news, the countdown completed on Tuesday, September 22nd. noon Eastern, and we now know about the HeroQuest reveal. It was as expected. HeroQuest is being relaunched as a board game in a form largely unchanged from its original. According to their site, there's going to be 71 highly detailed character and furniture miniatures, as well as offering 4 bonus miniatures and an exclusive mini only available to backers during this funding campaign. Now, these minis are going to be in full plastic instead of cardboard like some of the originals, and the quality looks pretty good. The game's being funded on Hasbro's own Kickstarter-esque funding platform called Hasbro Pulse, with a funding goal of $1 million. Now, I don't know a whole lot about producing board games or what it takes. I know that Opti does, and maybe we'll talk about it in a minute, but that sounds like a really high goal. We'll get into that. First, there are 2 tiers at which you can back this game. The first tier is Heroic tier for $99.99, and you get the game and all the miniatures, including the bonus ones. It looks like there's also going to be a couple of expansions to the base game, and those expansions are going to be available to backers of the higher Mythic tier for $149.99 or $150. It's already funded, but the Pulse campaign is going to remain open to potential backers until November 6th. Stretch goals exist, or they call it something else, like Epic things, their own branded thing. There's a
Spacefinder level.
Yeah, there's a Warlock hero you can get. It's already been funded. There's extra enemy minis and a quest book called Prophecy of Telor, written by Stephen Baker, the original designer of HeroQuest. So I think that this game sounds all very exciting. Fans of the old board game are probably pretty excited about this coming back with updated, more detailed, really cool-looking minis. However, I've got one big problem with this whole thing, and that's that Hasbro is the biggest board game company. Why are they funding this through a crowdfunding campaign?
Excellent question.
So,
and not to mention, not only are they doing it through like a crowdfunding, they're also doing it on their own platform, so they're not getting any of like the fees that Kickstarter normally takes.
Right.
So they're getting their full.
I mean, like, not only, and I don't think you made this particular, but if you did, I apologize. But not only are they the biggest board game manufacturers, but Wizards of the Coast is also a subsidiary of Hasbro, right? So it's not like they don't have this stuff in their wheelhouse to do without having to do a Kickstarter or crowdfund. This seems to me like a very, very bad thing for crowdfunding.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point that I was thinking, is that
please make it better than me.
Because you can, okay, so here's some numbers. Hasbro reported $520.5 million in net earnings in 2019. What they're doing is shifting the risk onto the consumer, right? Now, you could make the argument that whatever, this isn't a whole lot different than like a pre-order setup kind of thing. They're trying to gauge interest. It's probably a smart, quote-unquote, smart business move, trying to see who's going to be doing it. But my big problem with it is exactly what you just said, Opti, which is that they're using a type of funding method that is typically used by indie game designers, indie developers, and small-time people who need it. And it sort of feels like they're going to be cheapening or watering down or something this way of funding things.
So, yes, that's exactly where I was going, in that if you are a small independent game company like Dragon Unicorns or whatever, every bit of that money that you are taking in is going to produce the game or just to get things rolling. But if you already have, many people on staff. I mean, I would think it has, thousands of people on staff, and you already have all of this in-house stuff. You are going to make it so that anybody trying to compete on a crowdfunding platform is not going to be able to. And I think it's irresponsible in that setting to pass the risk on to consumers because they have no protections in this fashion, right? Like normally the big company takes all the risks and then the consumers decide whether or not they want to pay for it. This way, they don't have to pay as many people on the front end. They don't have to pay as much to people on the back end, and they have full control of whether or how much they provide to the people who supported them. Like, I just don't like this at all. All of it feels very
icky.
Gross.
Yeah.
It feels exploitative in a way that I can't quite put my finger on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to with maybe not so much a dissenting opinion, but maybe just a different way of looking at it. In that, okay, well, a couple things. First of all, I don't really see how Hasbro doing their thing takes anything away from anybody doing crowdfunding on other stuff, other than maybe some people might decide to drop their $100 on a HeroQuest box instead of some other Kickstarter that's going on right now. I don't think overall that it boils. I don't really understand overall why.
Do you mind if I butt in for just a second and clarify why I think that? Just and I don't want to interrupt you if you're on a roll or anything, but the reason I say that is because right now, at least in my head, and I could be wrong about this. Most people could think differently than I do, but at least in my head right now, when I see like Kickstarter, I equate that with like it's a safe assumption for me to think like, oh, this is sort of an indie company or an indie developer or some small time company that's trying to do something cool, and it's just an easy leap for me. I don't have to think too hard about it. But the more I'm going to see, like, if we start seeing Hasbro doing things like this, then it's not so easy for me to make that leap. That's the main issue I have.
That's a weird nebulous issue.
Yeah,
it is.
That's definitely not the first issue I would think of. The issue I think is you have people who use these platforms specifically to fund their projects, and big companies that don't need these platforms come in, co-opt the platforms for their benefit, and they're always going to come out $1 million stronger than any indie because they have that name recognition. I mean, we see this all over the place. Any platform that a lower income or indie person has had to use, when celebrities or big companies come in and start swooping in and using the model, they inherently are going to use it in a way better, more professional way, and then it starts kicking a bunch of other people off the how do I put this, like the presentability factor,
right? It changes the bar, the standard, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. That's actually one of my biggest problems. Do you remember the Wendy's RPG that came out a year or two ago?
Mm-hmm.
That was actually a really big problem. Thankfully, nobody else did that. But if you can imagine any number of companies starting to do that kind of stuff, taking even just the smallest fraction of their budget and throwing it into an RPG, right? They could make something better than all of us put together. Like, they could crush the entire industry. Like, I know, Cliff, like, I know you're shaking your head because I think that like indie development and doing cool and weird stuff is always going to be there. But the community itself, like as a whole, not just the people who like indie stuff, but the community as a whole could not be the same if lots of people decided to start putting that kind of money into this little niche gaming, tabletop gaming RPG thing that we all participate in.
Yeah, Cliff, you've been wanting to say something and I interrupted you, so go on and before we end up having to run out of time. So
it's fine. Go ahead.
No, I think we're done. So let's hear what you got.
I don't even remember. I had a point. It's like half formed in my brain now. I was going to say it then, but I don't have it anymore. So just go ahead.
I might be able to guess maybe where you were going with it, which is that if people were willing to toss $100 or just basically any money towards name brand stuff, they were probably never going to toss that money elsewhere. You already have these people who are like, there is brand loyalty in some way to that name, and they might not necessarily already be aware of indie stuff. They might not even trust indie stuff. They might be like, whatever. I'm sure this will come out great or whatever. Like, I'll find out later, but I don't need to back it now. But like when they see something that it's like, ooh, HeroQuest, I remember that. Like, that money was going to land in their lap regardless of if an indie developer came out and said, hey, I'm using HeroQuest.
If I can get to where I was trying to think of before was, I guess I picture, we picture these big companies as very monolithic, and not just made up of a bunch of different people with probably lots of conflicting priorities and factions. And I can just think of, and I'm not sure if this is how it went down, but I could picture like somebody going like, man, I work for Hasbro. I want HeroQuest to get out there again. And I go to my boss and say, we should do HeroQuest. And they go, there's no money in that. And I go, what? Look at this stuff on Kickstarter that's funding like crazy. And if we did something like that, I bet you we could do it. And the boss, all right, fine. If people are going to put money towards it,
you find the money.
Go ahead. So the boss dude is a money-grubbing, capitalist, greedy asshole. But there's people trying to make good things happen throughout that structure. That's kept by a greedy capitalist asshole.
You know what, Cliff? You've won me over. That's my headcanon now for how this went down.
Yeah, I do hope so.
Out of the budget.
Because
I can imagine that scenario. I imagine that exact scenario where some intern goes, hey, honestly, guys, we could totally do this thing with these IPs that we already have.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Let me do a Kickstarter.
Exactly.
Right?
Because despite the ickiness of it, it is cool. I am excited about the game, and I think it'll be cool to check out. So,
I kind of dig how it takes. Now, granted, it is co-opting the idea of crowdfunding, which is traditionally in the bailiwick of indie producers, who otherwise would not be able to make a thing happen without the Kickstarter campaign. But also, what it does is it gives consumers an opportunity to have a voice in the direction that a company is going to take on a very specific question. And I kind of like that trend a little bit, even though I hate capitalism.
Yeah.
You know what? I know that Bobby wants to wrap up, but like the one thing that I think you're onto is that there are definitely name brand things like HeroQuest, Veronica Mars, if you've ever followed that, like things that have gotten crowdfunded on $1 million levels that would never have been funded by any other studio normally, because they're like, but then when the fans come in and say, no, please make the thing, then they drop all the money. They're like, oh, okay, well, great. The fans kept it alive.
Critical Role animated show, right?
Yeah.
Perfect example for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, those are all really good points. And I hope that you guys let us know what you think. Those are just some of the things going on in the world of tabletop this week. If you have some of your some other news stories you'd like us to discuss, you should check it out and let us know on our Discord server at shadowcasters.network/Discord. We've got a channel there just for suggesting news items. Also, please check out our Patreon if you like what we do here and you want to help us keep doing it. Then patreon.com/Shadowcasters is where you can support us. There's lots of levels there. Check it out. And if you don't do Discord, you can always tweet us at SRCasters. Contact us through email at contact@shadowcasters.network. And thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. You know what to do. Click the bell icon, and we'll see you next week for some more tabletop news. Say goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.